Hello and welcome to the Plate Spinning Academy podcast, hosted by me, Nick Davis, a productivity mentor and multi-passionate entrepreneur. I know what it feels like when you want to do all of the projects all at the same time, with never enough time and energy to do it all. I'm a passionate creative who's found my almost perfect blend of business and life that keeps my head motivated, my body energised and my heart happy. I'll be talking about all things to do with organisation, rotas, goal setting, systems and structures, and strategies for business and life together, all combined with a healthy dose of accountability and motivation to help you on your journey. It's time for you to find your tailored recipe for accomplishment and contentment. Hello and welcome to today's episode. I'm going to be talking today about burnout, and I know I've mentioned this before, but this is more about my personal journey and what I've put in place for my safety net for when I hit burnout, because it seems to be something that comes up quite a lot for me. And I keep thinking, why, despite, I help others, despite I know what to do, I'm sensible, I shouldn't find myself in this situation, why do I keep hitting burnout? And what can I do about it? Because, it's been quite a few times now, and some more severe than others. And it's just, I find it so hard to navigate. And I pride myself on being organised and being on top of things, managing things and being resilient. And yet I'm still kind of hitting burnout every now and again. And I've realised part of it is because I have come to the conclusion that I am probably neurodivergent. This hasn't just been plucked out of the air. This is down to my biological daughter finally getting diagnosed at the age of 29. I always knew when she was younger that she had some issues with normal learnings and communication skills, and she was of the generation, as I was, where that wasn't a girl problem, was it? No. So going through getting her diagnosed at 29, when I started to look more into what she was going through, I related to a lot of it. And we're now at the point where my granddaughter is going through a similar diagnosis, and hopefully she's going to be able to get that a lot younger. But it seems to be, maybe I'm the culprit, maybe it's from me, if it is hereditary. And the reason why I mention it is because I feel like one of the traits of having a neurodiverse brain is you're chasing the dopamine, and when you hit it good and you want more, so you do more, you feel great. So you think, I can take on the world, mate. I'm fantastic. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to be successful. You end up taking on too much. And I've realised that there is a pattern to my life where I get on a roll with things, and then all of a sudden, bang, there you go, I've hit burnout again. And it is purely down to being completely overwhelmed, thinking that I can do more than I can actually do, and thinking that I'm some sort of superhuman and, that I'm different from everybody else and I can do it all. And the answer is I can't. And I know there is plenty of people within my business community as well have a similar kind of way that they work. We have to parent ourselves on this. We have to be super tuned in to what these burnout symptoms are, or certainly the early burnout symptoms, and how we can navigate our natural urge to want to do more, to want to chase the dopamine, to want to be successful, to want to fit as much as possible into our lives, because we get bored so quickly. We've always got to be doing something, yeah? So it's something that I've kind of realised over the last few weeks, because like I said, I found myself in that again. I still have to perfect this pacing myself fully, but I have put things in place that are working well for me. But I'm thinking back to, when I have hit burnout in the past, and way back in 2003, I was doing a really good job, but I was also studying. We'd just moved house. We were under a full house renovation. And looking back now, I'm going, Why on earth did you think that you could do all of that? How did you expect that to end? We'd just renovated, we'd moved house, we'd renovated the house. My dad had died a couple of years before, so that impacted me massively. I was working, I was getting more and more hours. I was in a job that I wasn't technically qualified for or experienced in, but I loved it that much. I just kept going. There were some issues, and I ended up getting ill with a virus, and I never picked up from it. And I ended up having to quit my job because I was just so poorly and tired all the time, and it took 4 years for me to get back into employment. So I kind of thought, yeah, that's one peak in my life where I was doing absolutely way too much stuff. After that, we moved house again, because it wasn't settled, the house wasn't big enough, and it was actually cheaper to move. And the house sold straight away. It sold within something ridiculous like 48 hours. And so it was like, okay, this is going to be the easiest way to do it. We weren't settled there. My depression was coming back. We ended up moving house again. I mean, I move house so many times, it's ridiculous. To another full refurb. This was an amazing house. There's a lot of work to do, and I got stuck into it good and proper because I loved doing DIY as well. And at the time I was physically capable of doing it. As time moved on, I realised actually I wasn't happy in my marriage. It wasn't the house that I was never ever unhappy with. It was my marriage. So I then was going through divorce. I moved out with the children into a rented property around the corner. Around about that time was the first time that I had serious heart issues where I thought I was having a heart attack. It turned out to be anxiety at the time, but it was extremely stressful. Anyway, a few months later than that, 16 months, I was able to then buy my own property. I had got involved with what I didn't realise at the time was a narcissist. I was in an abusive relationship, although I wasn't aware of that at the time. But as you can see, there's this pattern of stress, but it does come in waves. I had managed to get over my chronic fatigue. I was back in employment, was full time. But again, I was moving. I'd just got divorced. I'd moved into this property that I was refurbishing yet again. And I was working full time at this point as well. My mum died in 2011 as well. And the partner that I had at the time, albeit a short relationship, proper messed my head up. I realised he was chatting up his ex-girlfriend whilst I was sorting my mum's funeral arrangements out, that sort of thing. So eventually when all of that finished, I shut down. I didn't know what was happening. I now realise it was coercive control. It was abuse. There was a lot of stonewalling. There was a lot of financial abuse as well. Again, I got overwhelmed. I ended up being off work with long-term stress, which was then putting my job at risk, and I just kept getting migraines all the time. And it got to the point where I actually left employment because I thought, if I don't leave now, I'm going to get sacked. By this point, I'd already decided I wanted to work for myself, so I was basically thrown in. I didn't plan to leave my employment so quickly, but it was just the best thing to do for my mental health and my physical health. Around that time as well, I was getting quite bad heart palpitations. I was getting arrhythmia, which is like an irregular heartbeat. So if you want to add that into palpitations, you go to bed at night feeling like you're not going to wake up in the morning. It's quite a scary thing. And although my heart was quite strong and was dealing with the sensations that it was giving me was causing even more stress. I was burnt out. I was overwhelmed. I just didn't realise at the time. And I had so much stuff going on. Again, I was in bereavement after losing my mum. I'd just come out of an abusive relationship. Finances were on the floor. My health was on the floor. I'd pretty much lost a really good full-time job, and then I was relying on my business, and at the time I didn't have a clue what I was doing. No strategy in place. I was completely winging it. Anyway, I managed to pull myself back from that, but you never really kind of go to the root issues about why do you feel like you can cope with all of these extra layers of stress and still be okay after it. I hadn't yet built resilience into my life. So that was another wave of stress that was just way too much for me to deal with. Anyway, kind of a little while later, I met my now husband, and everything was going fine with that. Things moved very quickly. He moved in, and 6 months after that, his ex-partner died, and we were suddenly thrown into chaos looking after the children full time at mine. And I look back now and I can see the signs there that I was not coping, even though I thought mentally I was coping. Physically, I was fainting. My immune system was low. I was picking up every single bug that the kids brought home. It was, again, a really hard time. We made the decision to move back to where the children were so they could stay in their school and have some continuity for them. It was another house move. I think with the amount of times I've moved house in my life, I should just be used to it. And it's a massive upheaval just on its own. So yet again, we're dealing with another bereavement, and we're dealing with children all of different ages, all with different understanding about what's happened, all with different needs, and it was just completely overwhelming. But because you're a capable person, because you get through, because you just get on with it, you think you're okay, and actually you're not, because this takes its toll over the years. It takes its toll. A few years down the line, we've got problems with one of the teenagers. He's getting involved in county lines. We had issues with behaviour. There was a lot of stuff going on again, and ultimately this affected us financially. We weren't able to work properly. We ended up having to move house again. This was to basically sell the house to pay off some debts. We moved into rented, and we knew it was only going to be for a year at the farmhouse, and it was an amazing year, but it wasn't enough. When we had to move house again, and that was planned, we knew it was coming, within a few weeks of moving house, I'd had my heart attack. I was also involved in amateur theatre at the time. I was doing a lot for that. I was supporting a friend who was going through something, and I didn't realise at the time they weren't being completely truthful with me, and it was causing me a lot of stress. And I just didn't realise, because I'm Nick, I'm capable, yeah, I can take it all on. My shoulders are broad, yeah. No, they're not. They're no broader than anybody else's. And I've kind of come to the realisation that I do not put myself first. I get myself into these situations where everything becomes overwhelming, and then is it any wonder that I break? So yeah, January 2020, I have a heart attack at 45. And if that isn't enough, we then go into lockdown, so homeschooling 4 children through lockdown was quite stressful. And because everything was kind of closed down, I had no aftercare for my heart attack. I was struggling to come to terms with the impact that it had had on my life, and it was just so difficult. And I thought, things can't get any worse, surely. And then they did. My health has been up and down since then. I've been at the point where I feel so ill, I think I'm dying. I can't function. My brain fog was taking over, and I didn't realise at the time, and I do now. Hindsight's great, isn't it? I was going through perimenopause too at the same time, which just on its own is hard work anyway. Tried at the time to build my online business, but I was just an absolute mess, coming to terms with where I was at in life, and decided kind of late 2020 to start working with a naturopath that I still work with today. And so I'm now on herbs. They are fantastic. They impact, the impact that it had just in the first week was unprecedented. It was like, these are definitely working for me. It's been up and down. You've got to kind of tweak them every now and again to get them right, and then a new issue will appear, and you've got to kind of change what you're taking. But as long as you keep on top of it, it works really, really well. So you think, okay, I'm coming out of it now. And then unfortunately in 2022, my brother-in-law died. He was young. It shouldn't have happened. He went into hospital and didn't come back out. There were failings at the hospital. I won't go into details on that. There has been a coroner's inquest. But unfortunately, my husband was assaulted the same day of the funeral later on in the day. And as if this wasn't bad enough, he then couldn't work for a few weeks, and I was then thrown back into trying to deal with customers, trying to deal with staff, trying to deal with a job that I don't actually know how to do, and just trying to keep everything going, trying to keep things going at home, looking after the dogs. It was an absolute nightmare. And I got through it. We kind of go into this mode where we're on high alert, we're in firefighting mode. We're good in a crisis, yeah. It's just afterwards, when the crisis is kind of finished with, is when we fall apart. And I've realised this is exactly what happens. Now, I got on with things, and the turning point for me was the day that I realised the police weren't going to do anything. or they couldn't do anything, or it was going to take 2 years to go to court, and it was like, I can't do this. I can't put myself under any other stress. There is absolutely no point. There's nothing to be gained from pursuing this. The day after, I chose to sign up on a speaker program with Danny Wallace, and some of you will probably know who she is. She's a public speaking coach, and I decided I was going to get up on stage at Old Trafford and talk. I'd also that year decided to sign up to get a book published. So I had all of these positive things going on. So I was like, I've got to pull myself out of this absolute mess. And I used my anger and frustration as fuel and pulled myself out of it, did really well, got on stage, did my talk, published my book, all of that. Absolutely fantastic time, 2023, which is when I was on stage and when my book came out, was a really positive year. And I thought, this is good. I'm going to be able to, move on from everything. And unfortunately, my health let me down again. My iron levels are up and down. This seems to be something ongoing. I still need to get it looked at fully. I think I know what it is. I do take some medication to protect my stomach because I take aspirin every day, and I do think that has a detrimental effect to what minerals I consume or can absorb. It's just never ending. It just seems to be like a daily battle. But what did happen in 2024 was I had a bit of a turning point as well, where I stumbled upon a certain supplement for menopause, and within hours I was feeling a lot better. And I thought, I finally feel like I'm getting back to my old self. And I turned 50 last year as well. And it's like a bit of a realization, that we're not here forever, and I need to turn this around, and I cannot continue to live my life in this constant cycle of boom and bust with regards to my health. I have to get it right. So coming now to kind of 2025, it's been a stressful new year yet again. I feel like this time of year is where my health lets me down the most. So what I need to do is put things in place. So next winter and next January and February, I've got things in place. Maybe it's taking a specific kind of supplement. Maybe it's making sure that I get out every single day, because I've turned into a hermit again. I struggle to get out of the door. It's cold. I also have fibromyalgia, and this cold, wet weather causes my joints and my muscles to ache so much, and you just don't feel like doing anything. But I know that I can't continue like that. I know that if I want to live a long and happy life, I need to be putting the work in. I need to kind of roll back the last 20 odd years of stress. So what do? My safety net that I've put into place is my systems and my habits and my structures and my rotas. What I have is I have like a self-care check sheet. I've actually put it into a spreadsheet, and these are, I think I've got 25 or 30 things that I do on a daily basis to make sure that I am looking after myself as best I can. And these are just tiny little things, like making sure that I take my medication, making sure I take my herbs, making sure that I have a protein breakfast. And for me, that is mackerel. I have mackerel on toast almost every morning, not every single morning, because otherwise I end up snacking, which isn't good. So I need to make sure that I'm cutting out the snacks. But I have this self-care tracker in place, and it's a visual, so I can see where I'm doing well and where I need to improve. So that's one thing that I've got in place. The next one is a meal plan that I update regularly, and I have to make sure that I am reducing my UPF, which is ultra processed foods. So I still have some of them, but anything that I look on the packet and I don't recognize the ingredients, I try my best to avoid that kind of food. The difference since doing that has actually been very, very good. That's something that I make sure that we are eating properly. I make sure that we're eating plenty of meat and potatoes and vegetables and casseroles and stews, chucking all that veg in there, making sure that it's a reasonably balanced meal. I'm making sure that I'm on salmon twice a week. Like I said, I do need to improve. There's always room for improvement as far as meal planning is concerned, but I've got the basics in there, and once I've got that into a habit, which I have now, I'm looking at improving it. I'm going to be going back to homemade cakes again, because I do like cake. I do like my cakes, but the cakes you get from the shops, they've got some nasty things in them. So I'm slowly getting back to home baking. So that's my meal plan. Then some of you will know I've got this big housework rota system. I did a podcast on it a few weeks ago, and it's your housework rota for the year. And what I've actually done recently is I've created like a dynamic spreadsheet where it's all linked and you can put stuff in there. I'm currently testing that, but I've got that ready to go. One of the things I have had to do lately as well is pull back on the housework standards, because I know that's something else I've talked about previously as well. Housework standards. What do you want your house to feel like, look like? What's good for you? And I've had to reassess mine lately because I just do not have energy or capacity to keep it pristine clean. There's a lot of upheaval as well. We're doing a lot of decluttering, but to go back to using the rota for me is part of my safety net. And I also have in place, my work is all over the place at the moment. However, I do have a standard working week, which is balanced between working from home on the computer in the morning and then working from my workshop in the afternoon, as long as there's nothing else going on. But having that in place means that when I start to feel overwhelmed again, when I start to go down that burnout path again, I can pull myself back with the tools in place. I've got my systems, I've got my rotas, I've got my structures, I've got my meal plans, I've got all of that. And when I realise I've taken my eye off the ball, one of the things I do to get back is I go back to these, because quite often I do forget to use them as well. So coming back to using them and thinking, right, start again. This is my base point. Start with your self-care tracker. Make sure your meal plans are up to date. What housework are you going to be doing on a regular basis? And then what is your work week going to look like? Now, that works for me. I've only implemented some of it more recently. Longer term, obviously the meal plans and the housework rota has worked really well. This self-care tracker for me is a new one, but it is already paying off. I've been using it for the last few weeks, and even remembering to use it is a habit in itself. But that all seems to be working okay, and I now feel like I may start to go down the burnout path again, and I have to put things in place. One, to make sure that I make it as difficult as possible for myself to go down the burnout path, but two, that when I realise I'm on it, that I can pull it back as quickly as possible. I guess I've used my story as an example, and maybe you could think about what patterns do you have in your life that are maybe part of your self-sabotage pattern. For me, it is thinking that I can do more than I can actually do. Thinking that when life gets stressful, that I just do even more. I realise my health, whether it's my mental health or my physical health, has to take priority over absolutely everything else. Because if I don't have my health, I don't have anything else. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Come and find me on socials. I've got a couple of free groups you can find on my profile that you are welcome to join. I'd love to hear more about what you'd like me to talk about on the podcast, and I would welcome your ideas for future episodes.